Hello and welcome everybody. You just heard Kevin talk about the rise of the imagination age. The COVID pandemic was a black swan event that reshaped the world. As the pandemic became a harsh reality, many businesses adapted rapidly. However, businesses unprepared to be digital faded away, while the businesses that adapted quickly thrived. Also, various industries were impacted in different ways. There are some common shifts that will require businesses to operate differently in the post-COVID world, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Reimagining the enterprise operating model for the post-COVID world. There are primarily four areas that brought about this shift in the post-COVID world. One was this rapid rise and shift to the digital workplace. Then there was a significant disruption in the global supply chains. There was again a rapid adoption of frictionless consumer engagement. And finally, disruption in business models. So today in this fireside chat session, we're going to talk to two very seasoned executives from different backgrounds, different industries about this topic. Verma is the global CIO at IFF, a very interesting company that he's going to share some more insights about. And Hiten is the Chief Product Officer and Acting CIO at Rush Medical. Welcome, Vic and Hiten. So to start off, tell us a little bit about your business and how it was impacted by COVID, Vic.
Thank you, Anupam, and thanks for having me. So COVID was obviously a large impact for everyone, but being specific a little bit about IFF. IFF is essentially a 130-year-old B2B company. And we deal with all of the global consumer product companies in the world. So as you've seen over the last year plus, that there's been different shifts in consumer behaviors, consumption models. Restaurants are closed, which is an impact to us from a food service business. Consumer discretionary changes are happening. We do a tremendous amount of fine fragrances and high-end cosmetics, and those were impacted. Stores were closed. So really, from a business perspective, a revenue perspective impact, digital workplace of how people operate impacted, how we deal with our customers internally as we're an essential business. We had folks coming back to the office even in the middle of the pandemic because we had to as an R&D and as a manufacturing company. So, we'll go through more of these as we go forward, but we've had a lot of different challenges along the way, and we've done, I would say fairly well. And in addition to that, we also had a big merger. So, and I know that's one of the things we'll chat about a little bit later, but that's kind of what's been going on for us the last year and a half.
Great, Hiten. How about you?
Yeah, so Rush University System for Health in Chicago is about a $2.5 billion health system with one flagship academic medical center in downtown Chicago, two community hospitals, one Oak Park, Illinois, and one Aurora, Illinois, and then a variety of clinics spattered across the geography. We also have a university for medical school, nursing school, graduate programs, et cetera, and a research enterprise. And those are the two primary sort of businesses that we have at Rush. And in reaction to the pandemic kicking off in March, all healthcare systems were largely shut down for elective procedures, which for about 2.5, 3 months shut off probably our most highest profit volume services, surgeries, and other therapies that were not emergent or emergency in nature. So that was probably like the big sort of spike for us in terms of our business model being reliant on in-person care for high-end services, and those same services were being taken over by, or the same assets or physical plant was being taken over by readiness for COVID. So what we like to talk about is the immediate pivot in March to readiness for the pandemic. Basically shut everything down and focus everybody on getting the lobby ready for a field hospital, getting the regular beds turned into ICU beds, finding new ventilators. it was all hands on deck to get us prepared for the surge that luckily in Chicago did not come like it did in New York. So we actually prepared well, and no one will ever fault us for preparing, but we were ready. And then by May or June, we shifted to a mode of running 2 hospitals in parallel, basically slowing down some of the readiness work, moving those beds and operating rooms back to use, and just resetting expectations of how do you get patients that need care into the environment safely, and not, obviously, there's COVID somewhere in the hospital. There are patients here that have it. When we had no internal transmissions, all of the transmissions that occurred amongst patients and employees were outside of the hospital. So we had no internal transmissions occur. And then ultimately, like as the volume started declining on the COVID side and we got more and more, I wouldn't say used to it, but recognizing what are the precautions and things like that, the going back to normal business climbed back up. And we actually ended up the year back in the black after taking 3 months of no revenue. Obviously, one, by pushing ourselves back into those volumes again, but also, obviously a lot of federal stimulus and government support to make sure hospitals can stay open and support the communities we serve.
So basically, there was a significant upheaval in your industry, Hiten. So we'll talk more about how you adapted and shifted your operating model to thrive in this sort of post-COVID world. Vic, you alluded to this huge merger that you've gone through right in the midst of COVID. And you were also grappling, obviously, with the tactical aspects of getting your employees to work from home and shift to a digital workplace. Talk to me a little bit about how COVID impacted both the merger and also the shift to a digital workplace.
Yeah, I guess the interesting part in this is that this was the largest merger that the company's ever done, right? So we acquired a significant portion of DuPont's nutrition and biosciences business. And if you think about that, that was a $26 billion acquisition. And in the middle of that, and for those of you who've done this before, that's tough, just regular. Okay, when you're going into the office and you're in war rooms with consultants all over the place. Now, just think forward. We had to do everything virtually, and I think I am absolutely amazed and to some degree very proud of our teams and how everyone came together. But the mission and the focus on the mission ahead was very important and very critical. I think what's one of the learnings is we kept focus, we kept prioritization on what was absolutely critical to do. And that way we managed the amount of activity. So in the middle of this, you can think global merger, we have filings in 100 plus countries, 300 different plants. We had to incorporate manufacturing. There's due diligence. There's a ton of systems work that was going on. And for the most part, we did it pretty well. Again, I think back on it, I'm like, how did we do that? I really, you'd have to think about it, but it was really around the systematic prioritization of activities, keeping focus for your teams, and then segregating the work off. So what we did was we partitioned the work. Okay, this one is, working on these things. And normally it's interesting when you're doing these types of activities, there's a lot of swarming activity. So we couldn't always swarm in the same way, right? So we figured out how to do it better. And we really leveraged the Teams environments, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, a number of different technologies. And we had a lot of third-party players in the mix as well, and the good coordination. And what I found out is people and companies are super adaptable. And when there's a crisis, you can see that level of change. It might have taken 5 to 10 years to get people to adopt the digital platforms like we did in the last year. So there's a level of resiliency that I think it's important for people to understand. But one of the things that was very clear across the executive committee, our board, was the technology was the saving, grace, put it that way. that allowed us to interact fairly seamlessly across various regions and challenges and partners. So from that perspective, right, we outlined a date about a year earlier, and we hit the date. So that's an amazing achievement in itself. It was the largest merger in our industry. So from that perspective, very, very successful. Technology was really the underpinning for many, many of the activities going forward. And I think there was this this reality check from the executive team that says, wow, we can really do this, remotely. And we can really coordinate all of this stuff remotely. And guess what? It works. And this is then you check the box to say, oh yeah, this is why I've been telling you to invest in these levels of infrastructure for the years. And then you go, okay, now I get it. Now I get it why you were expanding this platform or making this requirement or the endpoint devices. I mean, I think the other angle in all of this is we moved outside and, knock on wood, we did it fairly securely. So availability was good, security, endpoint protection. So you have to really think holistically. Not only are you moving the business forward in this environment, but you're doing it in a secure way, and you're absolutely, improving the collaboration to that. So there's lots of different things that I think, we don't have time to go over all of the different components here, but I think all of those things were very positive and really, help us get through the merger.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Vic. And, COVID obviously pushed our boundaries, but the amazing part, as you said, is how quickly we all adapted, right? And the reality is the technology already existed. It was just a mindset shift that happened and almost overnight in different industries, which allowed us to work remotely and, do things that we could never have thought, like meeting, hiring employees without even meeting them face to face, or, bringing on new clients without meeting them physically. All of this happened very, very rapidly and seamlessly. And now, as you said, you've gone through this tremendous corporate merger and met your deadlines. So that's great to hear. Hiten, obviously your industry bore the brunt of the pandemic, and you talked about it a little bit. The supply chains within your industries were severely stressed due to the surge in volumes and other disruptions. And also there was an impact on your revenues because you had to shift to obviously, treating COVID patients and opt out of the elective options, right? How did your organization adapt and change its operating model during this period?
Yeah, I think as I alluded to, like in the first 2 or 3 months, so basically March through May, it's all hands on deck, trying to find PPE, trying to find ventilators. And, the eye-opening moment for most of our senior executives was like, this is pretty bad that our healthcare system doesn't know where life-saving equipment is across the value chain, whether it's hidden in someone's closet or, it's on a boat from China. Like there was no ability to figure this stuff out at any sort of scale. So there was basically the blank checkbook. Whatever you need, go get it done. Was sort of the ethic during the emergency phase of the March, April, May timeframe. And then coming out of that, there was just the financial reality of like, hey, we just didn't have revenue, and we just went through a lot of expense to save our communities. And then there was just like trying to figure out like, how are we going to, hit our debt covenants and things like that. And, by a lot of tactical approaches, federal stimulus, things like that, we made it through our end of our fiscal year and didn't have, any debt covenant violations, which was great. So then, we're back into a more stable, okay, now what do we do? So we haven't forgotten about the lessons learned. There's a lot of teams working on how do we cross the city of Chicago. We built up, and our teams actually are running point on what we call the sort of the COVID command center across the city, where we're sharing data now. Like, hey, how many ICUs are filled? Can we divert people? Those are the types of sort of the supply that we control, meaning our assets, our capabilities to support the next pandemic. we're now sharing that information with our colleagues across the Chicagoland area. Have we extended that to the global supply chain to make sure we know a ventilator's in New York and not needed, we can bring it over here? We're not there yet, but I think those are lessons that people will be working on, that these pieces of equipment need to move around to where these hotspots are at a lot faster pace than they were during that period. And then from a business model perspective, I think for us, it was trying to get similar to the merger discussion that Vic had, was we had a strategic plan end of 2019. We were working on it early 2020 and then just froze. And we actually kicked right back into it. By the time we got past the sort of debt covenants to make sure like we were going to be solvent and bankers weren't going to swoop in, we were ready to go again. So in July, August, when our fiscal year started, we just pushed right forward on the original plan. And our original plan is to expand the offering that we provide to Rush patients through partnerships and with other care providers. So we closed the deal with Select Medical, the largest rehab company in the country, to be our exclusive partner in the Chicagoland area. We worked on a deal with Lurie Children so that our pediatrics footprint would be supported. So those are the types of projects where we're in flight. We just went right back to that model so that we can provide the comprehensive care that our patients expect across the care continuum. And then, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but like the consumerism side, we had made nascent investments, as Vic said, like we were investing in it. People were asking why. Well, we turned it all on when the day came that 80% of our volumes were going to be virtual.
Yeah, and maybe let's touch upon that quickly, Hiten. You have an interesting sort of a hybrid role, right? You have an external facing role as the Chief Products Officer, and then you took on this interim CIO role within the organization. How did that kind of prepare you for this rapid shift?
So for me, I was working on like the new services and businesses that we needed to take to the market through either, direct to our patients, to our other payer constituents, and the recognition that the consumerism machinery was moving. We were moving in the market. Everyone was sort of like incrementally investing there. And what we had built was a virtual care platform, basically to support the current business, the doctor's scheduled visits. Hey, if one of your visits was scheduled, do you have the tool for that? Yes, we had that. We were ready to go. And now, 6 months to a year later, we're realizing that like, hey, the consumer market has moved pretty quickly to be far more demanding of the level of service and responsiveness. I think Amazon just announced 60 seconds to a doctor or a provider picking up the phone. Like, do we have that SLA? Probably not. But that's not what we were shooting for. We were shooting primarily for care continuity for the patients that come to our business. So there's now a working group to like say, it's not just tech, it's going to be operations. It's a bit of all of these things have to come together to deliver the right product for that consumer expectation. And so those are the types of things we're working on now is it going to be yet another build, which is what we did? Or is it time to start looking out in the market to see who's already doing this at scale? And for those offerings, like the 60-second doc, we will never be able to operationally execute on that. That's not our business. Let's find a partner who can offer that under the Rush umbrella. And those are the types of services that we're looking at now.
Right. So Vic, again, your product is in many of the consumer goods, food, and other medical products, right? And it's a company that most people probably use the product of, but have never heard of, right? And you're integrated in the supply chain of your various customers. So how did you keep your customer supply chains from being disrupted while fulfilling these rapid shifts in consumer demand?
Well, it wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. so just off of the, as you look at this, not only is there demand inconsistencies. So, normally supply chains are designed to meet certain consumer demand based off of historical numbers, right? And then there's some dynamic components to it. But, never would we have expected that consumer products like hygiene products, as an example, exploded. Soaps, hand soaps, any type of detergent capability. We supply to, I can't mention all the companies, but they have wipes, antibacterial wipes. They have sprays, they have cleaners, and every time you smell something that's nice, you go, oh, that smells nice. And then, on all of those things we use, laundry detergents. all of these things exploded beyond any designed capability, right? And so if you look at there, you go, okay, first of all, we had to ensure that we had essential status for our employees who work in manufacturing. So if you start at the base layer, right, it's really the manufacturing, it's the people who go into the factories, who do all of the hard work during these challenging times and deal with the risk, and they're producing. So again, it goes back to focus and prioritization. We focused and prioritized which products, which regions, and then we had to do all of the deep data and analytics against the product variability, the supply chains, not only raw materials that we need, but also, as you pointed out earlier, into the CPG companies. And so that took a lot of analysis. And, we have had over the last several years continue to build capability in our analytics and data practices. So we have been slowly building capability that we leverage. There was a product that we had built that we called end-to-end, really being able to track from the molecular level products all the way up into the actual product that's delivered to a consumer. So as you know, I think what was surprising to folks was the level of capability that we were able to bring to the table. Things that took 6 weeks now are taking maybe 2 days to do the analysis on. So if you really look at the supply chain, how we're fulfilling it, the way we were able to do it is really through a combination of hard work and effort by human beings who went into factories, and then all of the analytics and systems work that we had done to show them what are the real capabilities, what's the capacity constraints in the environment. How do we meet that? I mean, supply planning and demand planning, these things had to come together in a way that they've never come together so quickly. And really strong partnership across our organization, across our supply chain and ops teams. Really working well with our head of supply chain, myself, the business unit presidents, understanding how we have to shift. New customers came in asking for new requirements. And if you recall early in the pandemic, right, there was a big demand on hand sanitizers, right? All of a sudden, everyone's bottling a hand sanitizer. And being a large global specialty chemical company, that was something that we could do. And we did it in a significant way across the various regions that we support and have manufacturing footprints in. We're able to support the local municipalities and regions and really help with that. And so, there's lots of angles on this. I can even take you down one side angle here for a second. With COVID and being a sensory company, smell and taste, one of the issues or the symptoms of COVID is a loss of smell and taste. And so we actually developed a few rapid tests with University of, I can't name all the places we work with, but we work with medical institutions, and we came up with some tests as well that people could administer fairly quickly and really high level of accuracy in determining, hey, did you have COVID or not? So these are all part of the things that we had done in supply chain, not only serving our customers, but also serving the communities that we work in.
Right. So, Hiten, obviously in healthcare ecosystem, there was a rapid adoption of frictionless consumer engagement, right? We saw that, healthcare moved to a virtual touchless digital model with telemedicine and remote diagnostics. How did you leverage innovative technologies to service your patient needs in this remote environment?
Yeah, so before the pandemic, we had a nascent telemedicine program. It was an emerging market need. We'd invested in the technology. There was a program team doing basically urgent care type visits in lieu of going to the ED or to an urgent care site. Like we would have a, maybe not 60 seconds, but maybe a 3 to 4 minute wait to have a call with a rush physician or even asynchronous visit. And that was launched the summer of 2019. The technology was being worked on before that. We launched it formally as a business line at Rush, and we had, I'd call it 10 to 20 visits a day coming through and staffed by our ED physicians as, something that they did as part of the day at the hospital. And then here comes COVID, and that team was asked to support 1,000 a day, with all of the teams that had never been trained on the technology. And you realize all the warts and pimples, but it worked. Like, all hands on deck. We got every physician trained that needed to see their patients. And the primary goal during that phase was care continuity. These patients who normally would come in for their, hypertension checkup or their diabetes visit, it's, a wellness visit to their doctor in a scheduled fashion. We, bought 1,000 iPads, loaded them up around the facility for the doctors to be able to do these calls. So that was basically the first phase. And then there was the move of like, well, what else should we be investing in? Remote patient monitoring or, other data streams. And what we found was that like, there was just like a mad dash for adding tech without figuring out the reason, the operational rhythm. And so I think we didn't jump too fast into adding more tech, but we actually, as the volume went from 80% of our visits being virtual to now back to about 20 to 25% virtual, again, mostly around urgent care and, wellness visits that don't need to be in person. That's primarily what we're doing. Now it's like, well, what do we add? How do we add it, thoughtfully so that we're scaling up? And so what we have found is like, we're just doing the investigation of like, who are the right partners? Because this market is now to some degree at scale. During this period, Livongo and Teladoc merged in a $20-something billion M&A deal, and now they bring together some of these assets at scale. And there's Amwell, there's a whole bunch of other companies out there that are delivering on virtual care at scale. And now Amazon just got into the game as of last month. And so for us, it's sort of like the pause. Are we building this? If we're building it, what's it for? And if we're really going to do it at scale, we probably need to find a partner. And so we're trying to separate the consumer side of the business, trying to be like, well, we need to do it at scale to be competitive, and we won't be able to catch up to the big guys. And then for the acute care side, remote patient monitoring for, call it hospital at home, that's still a greenfield. The more the digital companies haven't figured out how do you take care of a fairly acute patient using these remote technologies. So that's an area we're probably thinking about more build versus partner. But all of them are just being more thoughtful than trying to add stuff to the bag of goods in the middle of an emergency. I think we happen to have the technology ready to execute. And then we realized like, wow, that was a lot of growing pains. We probably need to have a more thoughtful plan if we continue down this path.
And I think you anticipate healthcare to be now in this hybrid mode on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I did some of my executive rounds to different clinics and asking questions like, if you really were to push, how many of these patients would be annoyed after this is all over to having come to the doctor's office? And people were saying roughly 50% of patients could probably only come in to talk to a person. No vitals being taken, and then if you said like just basic vitals could be done at home, a Bluetooth scale or blood pressure cuff that the patient can do. Well, then you're probably at that 50% mark where the physical interaction is like not required for that visit. And that's probably what we have to get ready for. And just find the visit types that can be fully virtualized by not just the video encounter, but that technology being sent at home. So, remote patient monitoring is less about continuous monitoring, but, at some point in the future, every home might have, the rush kit. And if you want to have, your ear checked out, put that thing in your ear. I mean, those technologies are now out there. We just had to figure out the operational model to make that, to execute on that and make it cost effective.
So every crisis is an opportunity.
Well, I mean, those technologies are out there and we saw them. We were all like, hey, that'll be great. But then like, well, how are we going to do that? And so all these like idiosyncrasies of how do you put that together in a cohesive fashion is the challenge ahead.
And the main point here is that consumers now are willing to, shift rapidly, and adopt these products, right? Mm-hmm. So Vic, when the pandemic started, we conducted a research and saw a significant dip in investments in IT. But later on in the year, when we repeated that research, we actually observed a very rapid acceleration in investments in digital transformation, from hybrid cloud to AI and analytics and automation, IoT. What would you say is the playbook for building a strong digital foundation for companies that want to kind of thrive in future such crisis and to continue to thrive in in this continuously changing business world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that we're approaching it is it's more from a business transformation perspective versus a digital transformation perspective. So what we do and what we've been supporting the corporation in is really looking at where the value drivers are for the company. Okay, so we look at the key value drivers for the company, where are the underlying business models or operating models, and then how do we deploy and employ technology to accelerate them? So for us, it's really about how do we leverage the right tech to streamline a process, to accelerate, to provide a new insight. So all the things that you highlighted, from cloud to AI to analytics, all of these things are being used. I mean, interestingly enough, when you go, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but we're a scent and taste company, and you can't have people come in to taste and smell stuff, what do we do? And so it was interesting because you go, how did you do that? Right. So if you think about these plugins that you see on TV commercials, think of something that's, 100,000 times more effective or has more variables than that. And you can deploy these things at various different companies. We can have different technologies. We leverage AR, VR, right? So augmented reality, virtual reality, all of these things became extremely important for us because, we created these scenes, and we had people put on the glasses or other types of devices and kind of manage through that. So as I just highlight those as a few business cases, but if you really think about what's happened here, I wouldn't say it's accelerated our investments. What it has done is it has established the need for technology to be a fundamental investment component within the strategic plan, right? And so what we've done is we've worked with the executive team and the board, and we've really created a, let's call it, nearly 3 to 5 year plan, but really to the level of detail that we hadn't done before. So when we think about long range planning, it's kind of these big ticket numbers you put out there, but we've actually taken it down a level or two and just showing which components of the technology transformation, like data harmonization as an example, right? So you can't get advanced analytics, you can't get AI if you don't have a strong data platform, right? So really understanding where we have silos of data, how do we bring it together? How do we leverage that? And so across various different domains, we've highlighted from a technology stack perspective, and then how that technology stack and the products that we're producing actually impact the value drivers of the company. So we're trying to connect the dots in ways that we've never done before. And, if you think about supply chain optimization, the tools that exist out in the market don't serve all of our needs, right? So with the acquisition of the DuPont entity, we are now a make to stock company and a make to order company. And before we were a make to order company, and then we bought a make to stock company. And so they're very different business models. And now we're figuring out what are the technology environments, what are the capabilities we need to do. And what we're finding is, off the shelf doesn't always help us. And so where we can build business advantage and capability and competitive advantage, we're leveraging open source, we're leveraging AI, components, and we're doing it in a way that's smart, that again focuses back on the value drivers for the business. I think that's really been our playbook, is to make sure we don't push technology for technology's sake, but really tying that back. And what COVID has demonstrated is there is a value in building foundational capability at the ready, right? So I think that's what we've demonstrated, because we've been able to turn stuff on. And I think people go, oh, okay, so now you're telling me I need to build some capability. And again, I think there's a little bit of more openness, I would put it that way, to hear the technology play that can be supportive of whatever transformation we're doing in going forward. So it's really about a business transformation happening, and then how technology can be an accelerator for it.
Thank you, Vic and Hiten. This has been a very interesting conversation. McKinsey has termed this as the year of the pivot, and two imperatives that every business needs to have to thrive in this post-COVID world are speed and agility. So businesses have to reimagine their business model and recalibrate their operating model to enable speed and agility. And what you've shared with us today really epitomizes that. So really, thank you to you both on sharing your experiences and insights with the audience. Look forward to meeting you all in person real soon. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.